Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Stogie Lads podcast. Today, we are super excited because we have the honor to re-invite a previous guest to us. He's waving here nicely, but this is still just a podcast format, so we'll have to introduce you by voice. Aaron Sigmond, how are you?
I'm good, guys. How are you? Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it. I don't know if I really appreciate it. You guys appreciate it because I'm a busy guy, but let's just say I'm appreciative to stay relevant. So we're both appreciative.
Good morning. It's good to have you back.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for inviting me. Seriously, it's good. It's I saw one half of you in London. Apparently visa, border problems, past felony convictions. I don't know what kept the dynamic duo apart, but I assumed it was something. So
exactly. Unfortunately,
I forgot. You
that
guys
was the
are
case.
a tough audience. Most people find me funny. I'm just going to work harder on my material for the third time. I won't be doing this show. That's okay.
That was good.
No, Sig, honestly, it was such a good time last time, and if I remember correctly, you actually did have us laughing a lot, and starting out with it right now as well. You're a funny guy. What can I say?
Thank you. I appreciate that. You guys are funny looking, but I'm sure you'll work on the rest later in life. We should dive into it. We have a lot to cover. I don't know
absolutely
if we really do, but let's pretend we do.
A memory. I was listening back to this when preparing. We didn't want to ask you all the same stuff again. And one of the fun, like really kind of charming things at the beginning, you were smoking a Don Carlos Lancero, and Ruben and I mean, that's such a like rare cigar. We barely even knew what it was, and now we can actually flaunt that we have some of our own.
Look at you guys. Yeah, when you know the big guy, you get the good stuff.
Exactly right. Just for the people listening, we're not actually smoking them today, but.
And for those of you who are still listening, which is dubious at this juncture, I am smoking, as a matter of fact. Yeah. So because you guys said this would be Zoom, it would be recorded. So I figure, I would have been smoking. It anyway.
Will be on YouTube.
It really doesn't matter.
No. You guys need to see Sig's stylish man. Speaking of that suit that you had on, I didn't know you tailored it specifically for that London event.
Oh my God, yeah,
that was crazy.
So I've been wearing a combination of the true bespoke, custom made to measure, and what they now call semi-bespoke. Well, before you guys were alive. I don't know, since 94, something like that.
Wow.
94, 95. I haven't worn an off-the-peg suit in decades, quite honestly. Sometimes I have a piece designed specifically for an event. We should back up. I'll do a little hosting.
Yeah.
So we had a big event in London for Arturo Fuente, for the Arturo Fuente Since 1912 book, published by Azuline, photographed by Ian Spanier, available online at azuline.com. And we are doing a little bit of a world tour. Carlito Fuente Jr. And I. However, other people have kind of popped in and out. Chiro Casella came to the one in Dubai, as did Jeremiah Merifeld, who was at the London event. And then Carlos Fuente III was in Dubai. It was Carlito and I and his two of his daughters in Miami. So we've done Dubai, we've done Miami, we've done London, which was spectacular, which was a double event. Half of it at the Azuline, the Maison Azuline Piccadilly, which is fantastic. And then we strolled over entirely too far, according to Carlito, to James J. Fox, one of the oldest tobacconists in the world and very historic, for the Fuentes personally, because it was either the first store or one of the first stores in the United Kingdom to ever sell the Fuente Opus X. And then we had a Q&A there with Tom, editor-in-chief of The Rake, and that was great. So going back to the original starting point of this conversation, I did indeed have a suit specifically made for that evening. My suits are very Italian, and I wanted to mesh something together that was both Italian and British. So double-breasted pinstripe, but the pinstripe was pink. So it was it had patch pockets. It was an unusual suit, and people seemed to
shoes
like
with
it.
pink details on. That was
yes, a pink pocket square
what a
from Pucci, and the shoes were British. They were brogues from. He makes them every season. They were from Sir Paul Smith, and I like his stuff a lot. One season he did a patent. It's really not a patent leather. It's a high shine black leather with a pink like a pink outer sole. Like I don't know what that secondary sole is called. See, this is where Kirby Allison comes in handy, and not Aaron Sigmond. I don't know the anatomy of my shoes as well as I should. I will ask Kirby what that is, but it's the sole before you get to the part you're actually walking. It's not the inner sole because that's on the inside. You wouldn't see that, but whatever. It was pink. It all matched. I got a lot of compliments. Awesome. I appreciated that. We did a making of behind the scenes, the suit video. Not that anyone needs that, but we now
No, I thought it was cool. And I thought the event was amazing. I glossed over it a little bit because I assume the video I did very well. So I think a lot of people, probably most people listening here, have seen it either on Instagram or YouTube. So that's maybe why I glossed over it. But I want to thank you again for the invite, because that was
my
really
pleasure.
Spectacular. Lad, maybe you want to kick off with some questions about that, because that's
absolutely.
Since you were held at the border, and we just don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, he's an international man of mystery. He was he's going behind the front lines. No.
Next time I'll have to pull some strings to really get to the launch.
You're students, you barely work. I don't know how complicated it can be. There are trains all over Europe, for God's sake. I never understand. Sig, we're so busy. The podcast is taking so much of our time. All right, sure, you go ahead. They will never graduate.
Anyway, speaking of the podcast, the last time we had you on, you were talking about, it was 2021. And you
was it really?
It was 2021. It felt like yesterday, but crazily enough, it's 1.5 years ago. And you were mentioning a project that you couldn't mention really by name,
right?
And it was, of course, this book, Arturo Fuentes, since 1912, 2 books, from Dream to Dynasty as well, which is coming out in the summer, right?
Right. It'll debut publicly at the PCA trade show in Las Vegas, Nevada, during which, for those of you who don't know, and I would assume most people listening to this would, other than Dortmund, this is perhaps the big, not perhaps, it is the biggest and most important trade show in the cigar industry. It has gone by a number of different names over the years. When I started in the industry, it was the RTDA, which was the Retail Tobacco Dealers Retail Tobacco Dealers Association of America, I think it was. And then it was the IPCPR, IP. So something PCR, cigar something. Cigar was the C. I don't remember what the acronym stood for.
1 out of 5.
And now we're at the PCA, Premier Cigar Association. So it's gone through. It's always been
some name changes.
Right. And somewhere in the middle of all that, because I went to my first show, it's either 94 or 95, right around the time I started having suits made, funny enough. And it wasn't always in Las Vegas like it is now. Like the last 15, maybe even a little longer years. Well, no, because we did one in Nashville in like 2009 or 10. So yeah, maybe last 15 years, plus or minus. It's only been in Las Vegas because of the smoking restrictions here in the United States. But when I started out, man, we were everywhere. We were in New Orleans, we were in Nashville, we were in Orlando, Florida. It was Cincinnati, Ohio was one year. That's a must miss. Damn. You do not ever need to be in Cincinnati, Ohio, for sure. Sorry, all you Buckeyes who may or may not be listening. It's just Cincinnati kind of sucks.
Cincinnati. Go ahead, Lod.
Hoo day.
It is. So the second book, which is physically smaller, but is you know, the way
Also
I
much
like to
cheaper,
say it,
right?
well, no, that
The second
will
book.
not. No, it's gonna. I can't talk. Once again,
Ah,
I
okay.
can't talk about when you see it debut.
Right.
Could even be more expensive than the other one. I don't think they've set a price yet, quite honestly.
Okay, interesting.
So, but you
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
people, you may get a copy. So, but the book's not going to be sold as a standalone book. Is really what it comes down to.
Okay,
There you go.
Okay, got it.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
So,
Ruben, you had some
I see.
questions on the book. Maybe you want to go.
Yeah, so
Right.
just because we want to really talk about the book, since
Who's
that
hosting this show anyway? Me or
is
you?
the since that is, I guess, the biggest news that has come recently. And just tell us, like, from the beginning, how did you even get the gig to write the Fuente book? Probably from your previous gig, but
right.
How did everything?
So
when did your journey start?
I'll leave you with a teaser.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll answer all that. But here's a little teaser for you. Will not be the biggest SIG news by the end of, well, not even the end of 2023, probably by the beginning of fall.
Okay.
So there you go.
Great.
Dropped a little
super interesting. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Give us more.
You're just forcing us to have you on again. That's like with all these teasers.
That's me. You know, it was either Time Magazine or you guys. And so obviously
easy choice.
You know,
natural choice.
Easy peasy. So to answer your question succinctly-ish, it was a confluence of two serendipitous situations, quite honestly. That sounds fancy, but it's really not. Ciro Casella, who's the executive president of Arturo Fuente, Tabacalera e Fuente in the Dominican Republic, and the factory that's being built in Nicaragua. He wanted to do a book on Fuente. He also happens to be a big Azuline collector, and he owned two copies of the Impossible collection of cigars. He owned the standard edition, which comes in the cigar box with the slide lid, and he owned the humidor edition.
Right. Exactly.
And other than him and my mom, I don't know anyone who owns both versions of the book, but I'm very appreciative that he does. So so while he was he just didn't know how to do it. Right? It's like he had this idea and he wanted to do it. And I guess he had started working very early on with a photographer whom I never met and I don't know their name, and I apologize for that. But he had definitely started massaging the idea, but it was completely embryonic. Since the Impossible collection of cigars, which came out 4 years ago this June, I'd wanted to do a sequel of sorts, and I'd actively wanted to do that. And I wanted to do it as a mono-brand monograph, which simply means I wanted to do a large book on a single brand or a single family in a collection of a portfolio of cigars, which Fuente is. And there are really only so many brands in the world that fit that description. And so I reached out to Carlito, and anyone who knows Carlito, and I've said this in public as well, if you send Carlito an email, you will not get a response. And it's not because he just doesn't really respond to emails. So, and I was so ready, even though I've known Carlito and his father. Somebody asked me when we were in London, when was the first time I met Carlito and his father? And I've got to verify this. I always thought it was at one of the Cigar Aficionado Big Smokes in the mid-90s. However, as I reflected upon it, I believe it was 1992 at the grand opening of the Grand Havana Room in Beverly Hills, California. I have to ask Carlito if he was there. I'm almost positive he was. And if he was, then that's where I would have met him. So I've known Carlito a long time, irrespective of all that. Somewhere in the last 27, 28 to 30 some odd years, I've known Carlito. But he's not the type of guy I would just call up on the phone. I mean, quite honestly, I'm not timid or shy. It just somehow didn't seem appropriate. I wouldn't just call him and like solicit him a project. So actually, I reached out to our mutual friend, Uncle Joe, aka Jose Blanco.
Nice.
And I said, I have this idea, and he's like, your timing. He knew about Chiro's plan, but I didn't. And he said, I think your timing could be spot on, just very, very serendipitous. And you should reach out to Carlitos. Send him an email, but this time copy me. So I sent him a long email.
Yeah.
Week goes by, 2 weeks goes by, 3 weeks goes by. I'm patient-ish, but I'm not overly patient.
Yeah.
And so 3 weeks in, I do call. I phone Jose and I say, dude, and he's like, hermano, tranquilo, relax, man. It's all good. It's like someone will get back to you. And about 2-3 days later, Ciro Casella reached out to me and said, I have an idea for a book 2. You obviously have ideas on the book. And in some ways, in many ways, the Arturo Fuente since 1912, which is essentially the same format as the Impossible Collection of Cigars, which is now going into its 5th printing, which is just amazing.
Wow.
5th printing in 4 years. Yeah, that doesn't include the special edition. So very special.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
He said, why don't you come down to the Dominican Republic and we'll discuss this in person. And as they say, the rest is history. So I knew I would do a project. This is, the books are very different. I should say that they are incredibly different. One is, the large one can only be a maximum by virtue of its size and its hand binding and whatnot. It can only be 240 pages. The other one is 304, 308, I think, and is about 3 times longer as far as the text goes. So it's a much more in-depth read. One is really an objet d'art / book. It is visually driven by arresting photographs, really powerful imagery, all shot by Ian Spanier, with the singular exception of vintage. Any of the historic or vintage photos, obviously, Ian didn't do, but he did everything from the portraits to the landscapes to the still lives. And so we did that, and then it was just different. And then Ciro wrote the afterword, and actor, director, musician Andy Garcia wrote the foreword. Which was
yeah, exactly. Saw that. That's cool.
So he's friends with the Fuentes, and he actually shot a movie at Chateau de la Fuente. And so there you go. Yeah. Does that answer everything?
I think you got it. So far, yeah. Do you know what movie it was?
Lost City. That's why they have that cigar.
That's how the cigar got its name. Do you know how that cigar came about? It's in the book, but I'll tell you, it's a quick story.
It's very cool. Yeah.
So Andy Garcia was shooting the movie, but he was shooting it after the regular harvest season. But they needed tobaccos in the field because the whole scene takes place on a tobacco plantation, and you need to have tobacco on a tobacco plantation. So the original crop of wrapper for the Lost City cigars, the Fuente Opus X Lost City, came from that special crop that they planted just to shoot the movie. And then they harvested it and they cured it and they aged it. And the result was the Lost City series.
That's really awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah,
it is really cool. You touched on it a little bit to go back to, because this is actually 2 books, right? And the one we dealt with there in London was the first one, which, like you said, it's a massive one. It's closer to the Impossible Collection Cigars in the style.
Same size.
But that was just one book, the Impossible Collection of Cigars, right? How without going beyond what you can say, how come this ended up being 2? What was the idea behind that? And how did you reach that?
So I'll start at the very beginning. The Impossible Collection of is an ongoing series from Azuline, and there are a number of different Impossible Collections. There's the Impossible Collection of Watches, which is written by Nick Falks, and Nick, sorry, I heard something. And Nick, Nick obviously has his own show with his 2 sons and is a big cigar guy. But he did the Impossible Collection of Watches. There's the Impossible Collection of Art and cars and motorcycles and whatnot. And I'd written a previous book for Azuline, and I went to Prosper Azuline, who is the co-founder, and with his wife Martine, and I said I want to write the Impossible Collection of Cigars. 48 hours later, I had a contract for that book. So the format, to a degree, for all the Impossible Collections is similar in that, like in the wine book, instead of having cigar bands, obviously, there are wine labels that are hand-tipped into that particular book. So we brought that forward. So when we were doing the Fuente book, we originally were only planning on doing the Ultimate Collection. So the Impossible Collection of series falls within the Ultimate editions. That's what they're called at Azuline. So we knew we were going to do an Ultimate edition for Fuente. And I kept on going down to the DR, and anyone who paid attention to my Instagram could figure out something was going on, because I was down there, without exaggeration, every 8 weeks, every 9 weeks for a year and a half. And so I just kept on writing, and Carlito kept on telling me stories, and I kept on writing. And the manuscript, the books, the Impossible Collection of Cigars, or Impossible Collection series, or the Ultimate editions, are very regimented within the constructs, or the confines, really, of their design. They all follow. It would be erroneous to call it a template, because each one is very, very special and unique. But it's nonetheless a template, for lack of a better word. It has a foreword, it has an introduction, it has a certain amount of text, it can only have a certain amount of pages, on and on and on and on. So it's very specific. It's rigid. That's the word I'm looking for. It's a very rigid. It's confined and it's rigid, in not a bad way. It just kind of has structure. Really lended to the credence of the success of the series, quite honestly, or that entire series of books. And so, we kept on writing, and Carlito was telling me story after story after story. And the manuscript, the original manuscript, all of a sudden was, at one point, it was double the amount of words that I was even on the outside allowed to put into one of the large books. And then it became almost triple. And I could have gone on. Like, I, without exaggeration, cut an entire chapter, an entire section. It's no secret. It was called Conversations with Carlito, and where I recorded all these one-on-one. So it wasn't in my voice. It was only in Carlito's, and we were going to edit it for punctuation and consistency. But the fact of the matter is, we just cut that out of both books, or it would have been, or the small book would have been 4 times longer. So it'll
send a little pamphlet,
content, right? Exactly. Content has a way of repurposing itself. It'll pop up. We had it transcribed, so it exists. I mean, the Word document exists.
It's not lost.
It's not lost by any stretch of the imagination. So we just kept on. I just kept on writing and writing and writing and writing. And the then editorial director of Azuline, who subsequently left and replaced by another, this guy Mark, he's like, and I'm going to use a bad word. Can we use bad words on the show?
I remember
so
last
he's
time
like,
you did,
it's just too. Yeah, I'm like that. I'm a New Yorker. So he just said, this is too fucking long. It's like, even for the Ultimate Edition book, it's just too long. So I basically have the original manuscript, which, for all intents and purposes, minus some editing, is what Arturo Fuente from Dream to Dynasty is. It would be erroneous to say redacted, but a heavily edited and abridged, that is the word I'm looking for. It's earlier in the morning for me than you guys, so finding the words I really want to. I'm only
You're doing great, man.
I've had my only 1 cup of coffee, and I'm only sipping tea here. But it's an abridged version of it. So if you really want the in-depth kind of knowledge, then Arturo Fuente from Dream to Dynasty is your book. If you want a really beautiful coffee table book that is informative, even the core chapter in the large book, we'll just call it, since 1912, is the creation of the Opus X, how the Opus X came to be, which is certainly a great origin story. It's not the origin of the brand, but it's the origin of kind of the modern iteration of Fuente as we know it today. We can't imagine Arturo Fuente Company without the Opus X. And so, but even that chapter is probably a solid 2,000 words lighter in the big book than it is in the physically smaller book. So that's just really the difference. So one's an abridged version of the other, but because of the size and because the photos are hand tipped in, the bands are hand tipped in, there's a bas relief clamshell box that it comes in. It's a very different thing. The smaller book is not small. It's the size of a standard book, and it is wrapped in gold silk. naturally.
Wow.
But it is a much more expanded text.
Okay,
that's so cool.
So, yeah, I mean, from those conversations that you were talking about with Fuente, you must have heard probably a few things that are not out there on the web to find. I mean, some things that maybe been told between people that he's had
I'd like to
conversations with.
think so.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely I interviewed a lot of people, and we worked really hard to get the origin story of the Fuente Opus X really right.
Mm-hmm.
And that is definitely the centerpiece of both books.
Right.
It is the core. It's not necessarily, there are two things that separate Arturo Fuente at this day and age from any other cigar company in the world, including Habanos for that matter, because I know a lot of your guys are in Europe. Yeah. And that is one, the Opus X, which was the very first Dominican Poro ever, commercially. I mean, I'm sure some guy slapped a couple leaves together and smoked something that was all Dominican, but that was available. Yeah. That was a commercially, the way I phrase it, a commercially viable Dominican Poro. So when you walk into a store and you see all these Davidoff, Dominican Poros or this Poro or that Poro, and they're all from the Dominican Republic, you can never forget that the single origin, the root of that all, the foundation is the Opus X. So that's number one. Number two is, even though he started out reluctantly doing so, the fact of the matter is the collaborations that Fuente does with Hublot watches, with Stefano Ricci, with Esti Dupont, with LA Blue, with the Fuente Opus X Society, all of these other things really sets it apart. Everyone does something with LA Blue and Esti Dupont. Nobody has as long running watch partnership as Fuente, period. Zenith did something for a brief while with Habanos. That relationship ended with the Cohiba 55th watch. I think it was a pilot's watch, as I recall. So just nobody does it. Nobody has a relationship, period, like the Stefano Ricci partnership that the Fuentes have. So there are a couple of things that really, in this contemporary period that they're in right now, really set it apart from, what you would think are the competitive set, which would be Davidoff, Padron, and Habanos, when you think about who you would put in that kind of top tier competitive set. And then below that, you would have someone like Rocky and, blah, blah, blah. So, So the book really, especially the small book, really focuses on the collaborations and how important they are to defining what Arturo Fuente is today. Because Carlito will tell you straight up, and he says it often, he's like, I sell as many cigars as I can make, and I can't make enough, and I'm not insert here the watch business, the lighter business, the humidor business, the apparel business, but once he got into it, it really has come to define, in my opinion, what Arturo Fuente is all about in this century, for sure, thus far.
Okay, so I wanted to ask something about the beginning of the project, because I remember you mentioned this during the that seminar or talk at JJ Fox, that in the beginning... Panel discussion, that was the word.
Yes.
Right? See, it's afternoon here and I can't find my words either, so your excuse is better than mine. No, but you said that Carlito was a little bit hesitant in the beginning, like beyond just being slow at answering, time was
utterly
just an issue.
Reticent So every conversation you have with Carlito outside the parameters of cigars, and if you ever interview Keith K. Park from Prometheus, which is, I mean, basically Ashton and Prometheus are the Fuente's two longest running partnerships of that ilk, and then you would have J.C. Newman is kind of that original, those OG, for lack of a better description, partnerships. But that's what I mean. It's been a core tenet of the Fuentes, or a core element of theirs, since day one, that they have strategic partnerships that are outwardly. The fact that they did a collaboration with Padron is so it's crazy. Just never been done before. It's because it's not the same as AJ doing cigars for Altadas USA. It's still a Monte Cristo by AJ, right? That's how it is. This is unlike anything else and Fuente is just riddled in the best way with firsts. I mean, they just are unafraid. That said, going back to your original question, Carlito starts every conversation with the answer no. When you read about how in Las Vegas, the Casa Fuente came about, Carlito's first words were no, or first two letters were no. When Hublot wanted to do a watch, they pursued Opus X and Carlito. Really? His answer was no. When I asked to do the book, his answer was no. Always for similar but different reasons. In regards to the book, he said no, because he said, it will be so time consuming. I do not have the bandwidth to do it. And that's when I said, absolutely no problem. I will fly him that by. I've genuinely, I mean, I could go back and look, but I've been in the Dominican Republic over the last 2 years, I don't know, 10 times, 9 times at least. Wow. And every time I was there, we were working on the book. I have hours and hours and hours and hours of recorded conversations with Carlito. And that's just the way it was. So I went to him. So it was very much, if the mountain doesn't come to you, go to the mountain type of thing. And that's how it worked. But I really, I really wanted to make him understand that it really wouldn't be like, by coming to him, it wouldn't be an issue. And it never was. So that quickly faded. Once he said yes, it all fell into place. Once we bought Ian on, it all fell into place as well. And Chiro was there every single step of the way. He greenlit it. He pushed it along. When I said I needed, I don't know, a crane or a ladder in the middle of the field at the chateau, he made it happen. I mean, it was such a seamless collaboration. Doesn't always work that way. I've done a number of books and worked with a lot of different brands. These are technically book 18 and 19. So, it doesn't always go this, but they were really into it. And after the book was created and they approved all the pages and they saw the box and everything else, I've never had anyone be more supportive of a project. Carlito has just been a dream, and Chiro has too. I mean, they've both been so unbelievable, as has Cynthia and all the kids. To be honest with you, the whole family really rallied against, or not against, that was bad, rallied on behalf of this, on this project. And they've been great. It's just been a dream come true, quite honestly. It's
and it also must be so beautiful for them to have all this, like, on ink and paper, their entire, like, family story, history, and these images.
They all seem to love it. So but it's and it's very emotional. Carly, I mean, you guys have been around Carly. He's an emotional cat. So you get really into it, and there were some really, really, like, personal, intense, intimate, like, close bonding things. Stories he was telling about his father, about his mother, about his grandfather, about the factory burning down in Nicaragua, about the factory burning down in Honduras, the warehouse fire in the Dominican Republic. I mean, like so many quote unquote overnight successes, to say the Fuentes have overcome what other people would see as insurmountable hurdles in their life and their family, and they always march forward. They always push ahead. It is a remarkable testament. And we talk a lot about, conceptually the American dream, about the betterment of every generation thereafter. And when you look at where that company is today, I would find it categorically impossible to believe that Arturo Fuente would imagine his company the global brand it is today. I just don't even think. We all dream big, but that would have been a big dream. And I mean, it's a testament to their fortitude. It really is. And I think the book is a chronicle to that fortitude, quite honestly.
Yeah, you were talking about how you were spending a lot of time in the DR, of course, writing this book over the past years. Were there any like unique, personal, crazy stories? You were mentioning that you needed to get stuff like a crane or whatever in there, but was there anything that really stuck out for you?
Yes.
And would you want to share that moment with us?
No.
No.
There were a lot. There were a lot. It was there are a lot of projects you do. You do some projects for the passion. You do some projects for the money, because it's your job and it's your gig, and you do it. And some projects are just ultimately very special. And when you also look at where we've been, London, Dubai, Miami, the next event that we're doing is in the Dominican Republic. Ooh. It's just kind of been a dream, quite honestly. It's just one of those, and it's not that it didn't have issues. I don't want to make it sound like everything just hummed along perfectly, because no project does. Yeah. But this is pretty close to perfect. I mean, it was very special, and certainly a project I'll never forget by any stretch of the imagination. So yeah, very proud of it. Very happy with it. I continue to write the story, which is something that internally people know. I don't think it's any great secret. Yeah. I don't even know if there'll ever be a second edition, quite honestly. I mean, there may be. There's no immediate plans to do so by any stretch. But, I remember watching an interview with Bill Murray and Johnny Depp, of all people. And they both portrayed Hunter S. Thompson. And they said, once Hunter S. Thompson gets in your head, it is impossible, because they both portrayed him in different movies, right? And so this was a one-on-one interview between the two of them, and they were like, once that guy gets in your head, there's no getting him out. And I think I actually mentioned this in London when we were having some of the panel discussion. I continue to write, if for no other reason than I just hear Carlito's voice. I keep on saying Carlito needs to be a motivational speaker. He is. There was one point in time in the book, I knew I wasn't getting it right. And what does that mean? Okay. I just wasn't firing on all the cylinders. It wasn't bad writing, but it wasn't good writing either. And a lot of people wouldn't, confess that to the subject of the book. And Carlito sent me, he was big on WhatsApp. He sent me a WhatsApp. I guess this is your personal story that you'll get. Yeah. He sent me a personal, he sent me a message on WhatsApp. I just began to cry. I was just like, oh my God, this is the most and I showed it to Mrs. Sigmond, and she's like, wow. And it was just so powerful and so impactful. Yeah. I've worked with global CEOs from Japan to Europe to the United States. I have never received a note like that. And it continues. Actually, Keith Park from Prometheus International just wrote me a note. He finally got a copy of the book, and both copies of the book. He read both. And he was just, very, very complimentary. But, it's a creative process, and you don't always feel creative. I mean, it's what separates the men from the boys when it comes to being a writer. I mean, people are like, do you ever get writer's block? And I'm like, I got a kid in private school. I can't afford to get writer's block. I mean, sometimes you just write something bad to get the ideas out. You put them to the side and you start all over again. But now it's clearer in your mind how to present those words, or that well of images, or whatever you're stuck on. Because I'm not just the author of this book. I was the art director of all the photo shoots, and worked hand on one-on-one with Azaleen. I mean, it's a lot of responsibility. I mean, it's a huge responsibility. I mean, I was the one who begged Azaleen to publish it, begged Carlito and Chiro to do it with me. And so if it all goes to shit, there's only one person that it's going to fall on, and that's me. And knock on wood, it all came together. But with a creative project, how many movies that could have been great were actually crap, because it just somehow it just doesn't fall together. But in this instance, it was spectacular, quite honestly. Yeah. So there you go.
God,
Awesome.
that's scary. That is scary when you put it like that. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on you. God, it's something
There
more
is.
technical though that I'm super curious about, because you said you had these hours and hours of recorded conversation, and you said you were the art. Like, how much time does this all take? How do you go about like getting that down on paper? Like, just technically, like, are you going listening yourself, or do you have like a team helping you, or how are you like doing all this
Sure.
stuff?
Carlito can't believe it. I actually still take notes. I know you guys are 21st century students.
Yeah,
In the old days, there was a thing called a pen, and then there was a pad of paper. I have a shorthand that I've used since my earliest days as a journalist. And so I write my own notes. So I have all my own notes. So if something doesn't seem right, I can go back and reference. So I have notebooks upon notebooks of this shorthand. So that's number one. Number two is the recorded conversations. Yes, we give them to basically a transcriber who would also be like a stenographer transcriber. And we're like, here's this 20 hours worth of conversations, go at it. And they put it into a Word doc. So, yeah, I mean, that is another thing that I think is a great misnomer about any of these books, whether it's the Impossible Collection of Cigars, whether it's the Fuente books, whether it's any of my watch books, of which there are, I want to say 11. There's a whole team. Yes, Ian, my name's there. Ian, in this particular case, as a photographer, is there. But make no mistake, if you look in any book of mine, there is a list, just credits, just like you would see movie credits or in a magazine masthead. There's a whole team behind me. There are editors in this case. There were 3 research assistants. There were 3 editors, not including the editorial director. There was a photo editor. There's a photographer. There's a photographer's assistant. There's a creative director. There's a senior art director who's really the designer of the book.
Yeah.
And then there's me as the art director of like the still lives and all that type of stuff. It's a big, and then there's the publishers, because Martin, less so, but Prosper Asleen was very hands-on on this project, as he was the Impossible Collection of Cigars, because he himself is a big cigar guy. So, and he loves Fuente.
Right, you said that in the last one. Yeah.
You have a publisher, you have an editorial director, and then you have everyone else. There's 20 people who work on this book before it even gets to the printer. And then the printing of the large book is so complex. There's a whole team on that. So
it's almost like the 100 hands that touches a cigar.
Right. Carlito says that's 300 hands, by the way. He's really adamant about that. I'd always heard, coming up through the ranks and in the business, I'd always heard 200 hands, but a lot of people now feel it's 100 pairs. Exactly. So, whatever it is many, many, many people that, the cigar that I'm holding in my hand, many people, impacted it before it got to me. And the book is no different. This is very much a team and collaborative effort. And it involved all the people at the farm, at the factory, at the box factory. I mean, this was an endeavor. I mean, it's no different than a movie production, quite honestly. It's not as big of a crew, but it's a project. And how do you do it? I mean, to be honest with you, when I do a project like this, even though I consult and do other things, this becomes my primary quote unquote job. This is what I'm doing for a set period of time, for sure.
But I mean, just the size of this project and everything, there must have been so much that you also learned about Fuente specifically. I mean, of course, you've been around a long time, so there's stuff that you knew. But if you could pick
Why don't you just call me
a few
old?
Things.
Sig, you're old, so you've been around.
I was hoping that one could slide, but
you flatterer. Stop it. I can't take it anymore.
But no, seriously, one of the few things, or maybe name 1 or 2 things that you absolutely had no idea about Fuente that you learned during this, and that might be difficult.
I said in London, it's all in the book. You gotta get a copy of the book. So I mean, there are, but I mean, it's and it sounds terrible. But funny enough, I was watching an interview with a famous actress, and she said, what I love about doing movies is I'm all about it. I'm all present when I'm researching a character or doing the project or looking at costumes and we're doing the production, and then you kind of move on. I don't know that I'll ever, as I said, I continue to write the book, whether it will ever be published or not. I mean, it's just something I'm doing for myself, I guess, at this juncture, and nobody's paying me to do it. So I continue to do it. But it was very present. So I've lived with this material over 2 years now. So it would be impossible and it's all together now in my mind.
Of course, yeah.
I don't remember what I didn't know before, and I didn't, that's fair. And I know. Yeah. What I can say is there are certainly details about the creation of the Opus X that I was unaware of. There were vague generalities, but now I know the absolute specifics. But to go back and look at, right now, I think the manuscript is pushing 40,000 words. To sit there and say, I didn't know what these 10,000 words were, I don't remember. But, I think I knew, I think I came into it knowing what most educated people in the cigar world would know about Opus X and Carlito. I mean, like I said, this was a very personal, close collaboration. It was a very intimate experience as far as things go. So there are all sorts of, there are lots of little things. Carlito spoke a lot about, actually one stands out, and I'll tell you, I think this is interesting.
Excellent.
Now that you make me jog my brain, it's coming up on noon here. So, I always thought, like everyone else, that the Hemingway Between the Lines was based on Barber Pole. I thought that was the inspiration, and it's not at all.
It's ice cream, right?
It's ice cream. And boom. Carlito, good for you. Boom. 2 points for Slytherin.
Slytherin, of course.
It's I don't know, shit. That was being after me, so it's like whatever. My daughter was really into those books, but I know Slytherin, so there you go. Hufflepuff, isn't that another one? I think that's one.
No, I was joking because Slytherin's the evil one, so I thought that was on purpose. Me in that one.
Sure. Well, then give me another one. What's the
Gryffindor?
Gryffindor. That's
there it is.
Well, 2 points for Gryffindor.
I'm sorry for cutting you off. Sorry.
No, it's okay. So I think, like other people, because you got to remember, when I got to know Carlito, there weren't podcasts like this. There weren't the video shows that there are. Course, I mean, YouTube wasn't even around, and so you just, whatever you read in my magazine, Smoke, if we didn't ask the right question, or the Cigar Report, or that's interesting, it's windy outside, or Cigar Aficionado, obviously. You just, if you didn't get it from one of those sources, or Cigar Journal, you just didn't know, because there just weren't all these taped or videoed conversations. So I just assumed it was a Barber Pole because that's what most people said. Right. And Carlito's mother, Anna, would take him for ice cream. I think it was every Sunday. It's in the book. It was one particular day. She would take the kids, and his favorite was fudge swirl or chocolate chip swirl. Again, it's in the book. I can't remember what flavor it is. I think it's fudge swirl. But that was the inspiration for the cigar. And, it's funny how things just become kind of, you think they're quote unquote common knowledge. You're like, oh, it's based on a Barber Pole, and that's not the case at all. And that may seem kind of like minutia or a little trivial, but it's not, and I'll tell you why. The impact that his mother and father and grandfather had on his life, and when you think about how things are created, how buildings are built, what the Hemingway house represents, the yellow road, the gazebo. All these things have one common thread, and that is family. And it runs throughout the entire narrative of the books and Carlito's life, and Cynthia's life, and the fourth generation's life. And that is the most amazing thing about it. So it's not just a correction of minutia. It is an articulation of the consistency of this theme, this thread that runs throughout a life and throughout a company and throughout generations. And then you understand the gravitas of it all. It becomes far more substantive than, who gives a fuck if it was a Barber Pole or an ice cream? It's important that it was an ice cream, because it's a childhood memory that was transformed into a cigar. That again was the first of its kind.
I completely agree. Yeah, it makes a cigar come alive completely, and that's a really nice way to sum up this book. I hope if we leave the Fuente book behind now, that some people that are better off than us will pick this one up. I'm certainly very curious, especially that second edition. I want to get into all those details. So that's well,
really I'll tell you, right after we were in London is when I started writing a very big section of it. That's the other thing. Carlito is a born storyteller. He's not a born writer, but he's a born storyteller. Sometimes somebody will ask a question differently than I obviously did, and they will get a very different answer than I received when we were doing the research. And even Carlito said, when we were having our conversations, my conversations with Carlito, he said, look, you're not going to get it all. It's like, my brain doesn't work this way. And he warned me. So even when we were in London, I went back to the hotel room that night, which was a very late night for me. And it was like at 3 a.m, I started scribbling notes, and really, they weren't all very coherent, but they were enough that I could go back, and then I fact checked some stuff with Carlito. So yeah, it kind of works out that way, is that someone will phrase a question simply differently than I would as a journalist or an author. Right. And Carlito goes on a vein of the story. It's not a tangent. It's core to the story that I just didn't have before. And that's why, like Depp and Murray, I can't get this one voice out of my head, because we keep on doing these events at the book tour, and it's really just spectacular because I just keep on consuming. I keep on absorbing it, and then putting it down on a page. And I think that's spectacular.
So cool. All right, that's a perfect way to sum up the book. We're coming up to an hour here, so I wanted to ask just a couple more questions. I don't know how much time you have here. All right, there it is. Well, there you have it.
There it is. We're done. No, go ahead. We've moved on. Ladies and gentlemen, that's called a segue. We are moving on.
Oh yeah. Because I was listening back, and I was looking back at our notes from the last time, and there was some stuff that we kind of choked and forgot to ask because we were so. I think
we also ran out of time.
Stuff. Yeah, that's true.
Right.
But we talked a lot about some of the. We talked a lot about some of the really cool people that you'd met through this amazing community that Cigars, brings people together. But there's a picture of you. It's an old one, but it's a picture of you with Michael Jordan. And I've always wanted to know. I know we've talked about this, you and me, Sig, like on Instagram, just the DMs. But I wanted to just get an idea of what happened there. Like how did that happen? How did you meet Michael Jordan? Probably through Cigars. But yeah, I'm very curious.
Well, more than that, actually, Michael Jordan was supposed to appear on the cover of Smoke magazine. So that was our. So, for those of you who don't know, the second cigar lifestyle glossy magazine in the world was Smoke magazine. I created that magazine. I was one of the partners on it. I was the founding editor of it, and we, like Cigar Aficionado, always had celebrities on the cover. Yeah. CA had not gotten Jordan, I think, at that juncture. Yeah. But Michael was married to his first wife, and he and his agent, and I went through a lot of hoops to get that. We had that initial meeting. It was at the St. Regis Hotel here in New York. We were actually smoking Cohiba Esplendidos that he had requested a couple of boxes, and we provided those for him. We had a meeting. We did a little bit of a one-on-one photo shoot. Number one comment I get about that is most people don't think I'm that tall, but he only has
it was surprising I met
like
you.
2-3 inches on me, so it's height wise I'm sure otherwise it's much different, and you gotta squeeze in a dick joke now and again.
You have to.
And so we had the meeting. It was great. The photo shoot was all set. It was in collaboration with another brand that he was working with, and it was at the time he was coming out with that Looney Tunes movie. I can't remember the name of it. The Space Jam.
Yeah, Space Jam.
He was coming out with Space Jam, and I can't remember if it was Playboy or GQ. He had mentioned cigars in one of those interviews, and he got a lot of pushback.
Oof.
And so his wife, not even his agent or his publicist, his wife freaked out, and she killed my cover. So
that's brutal.
Yeah, but we took the cover shoot actually happened. The photos exist. I just don't have possession of them, but I do have the photos of him and I together. And so there you go. It was a very, very expensive. Did not happen. So yeah, she didn't kill the shoots. She killed the whole project. They just pulled out completely. And can't remember. One of the big sports writers was going to write the cover story. I can't remember which one, but it was. Anyway, it was just one of those things,
What could have been, yeah.
What could have been, and then obviously, then he divorced Cookie, and then he's like been on Cigar Aficionado like 18 times. I don't know.
Yeah.
Did all the videos with Barber, which is fine. I mean, it's so much of life is timing. So Carlito talks about. Actually, that is another thing I talked about. He and I talked about. He talks about the Opus X really being a moment in time, and he's very, very specific about that, and very aware of that. It was, and so timing always plays into both successes and failures, quite honestly. That was just one of those things. But seen MJ subsequently at a couple of things. He always gives me a knowing smile, and that's kind of about it. So
cool.
There you go. So that's me and MJ.
That's the story. Nice.
That's the story.
There was another thing that you did mention when going through like your career and all that in the last episode. And one of the things that we kind of brushed over and that we didn't get into was that you mentioned that you had a radio show called was it Lighten Up Radio?
Lighten Up Radio.
Lighten Up Radio. Exactly.
Lighten Up Radio. I can do my radio voice for you guys.
Yeah, keep going.
I was going to say the hosting of this podcast that you've done it's got to come from somewhere. I was thinking. So yeah.
Oh,
probably Lighten Up
There's
Radio.
obviously great comfort doing them. There's a DJ, very famous DJ in LA, Matt Allen, who goes by Magic Matt Allen, and he's on one of the XM radio stations now. I can't remember which one, but he was big. He was a big DJ on a radio station in LA called Kiss FM, KIIS FM 106.7. I know K-Rock was 106. I can't remember I think it was 102.7. 102.7 on your FM dial.
Wow.
So he was a big guy. He was a big cigar guy. He was a big steak guy. I mean, still alive, so he is. We're just not, in contact anymore. Nothing acrimonious. It's just, I stopped doing the show, and that was the end of that. But that show ran actually he went independent with that. It used to be affiliated with Smoke Magazine. It was before there were podcasts. And I think that was the very first cigar magazine ever that did like an affiliated, an associated radio show. So we did it with Maddie, and it was great. And then I left Smoke, and he did it for a while with them without me. And then he took it on his own, and the show ran for a very long time, as a matter of fact, but did not have any affiliation with the publication whatsoever. So, but that was the original, and the show was great. We had guests on. Matt, like I was a very young member of the Friars Club, which is a legendary club in New York and Los Angeles, where all the old comedians belonged. And so, we had Milton Berle on there, and we had Buddy Hackett on there. We just had all these old time American comedians on there, and it was great. And we'd just get fucking hammered. We would just smoke. Even when we were in the studio, we'd have like a bottle. I mean, I was still drinking a lot then, so which I don't now, but we'd have a bottle of something in the studio, and we'd light up cigars, and we'd smoke, and we'd drink, and it was great. It was really kind of an outlaw thing.
Sounds like it would have been a good podcast as well.
Yeah, it was. But awesome. And now Matt just does XM, and I don't think he can do an independent project like that anymore. So I don't know how the show concluded, but I don't believe it's around anymore. But I was on it for a couple of years, and then when I moved on to other projects, as we say, it just I lost track. So
But at least we got a good radio voice out of it.
Yeah. So. Oh yeah, no, for sure. It's funny. The studio was in LA, and we used to have an office for Smoke in LA for the covers and the cover shoots and the celebrity interviews and all that. We had one sales guy there, one editor there, and I was there every month. So it was easy to do the show. We would record a couple, and it was syndicated. It was syndicated a lot. Like it was on a lot of different, before XM and satellite radio. If you wanted to get broad reach out of one market, it was syndicated, and it was in a lot of markets, which I was always surprised about. Because but Matt is he's a comedian, he's a DJ, he's a really great host, great co-host, but really the primary host. He was fantastic. Learned a lot from him. That's mostly how to go to rehab, I think is. I don't think Matt ever went to rehab, and I didn't either. But he coulda.
Coulda, shoulda.
All right, exactly. What else did we gloss over before?
One thing you mentioned, which that I was curious about, because during the time you were working on the Impossible collection of cigars, you said 70% of it was Cuban cigars, and you mentioned that you traveled to Cuba and you worked with Habanos on it, and I was just curious how that was. Like, what is it working with Habanos? Because it feels like it's not like a company in the same way. It's a government. It's part of a government, kind of, right? Like it's
not
complex.
Kind of. I mean, it's very complex to navigate working with Habanos. And I would think if you ever have a Habanos distributor on here, whether it's Gemma Freeman or one of the guys from Fifth Avenue or something like that, they would tell you the same. It's I'm dealing with them on a secret project right now that I can't talk about. And just getting a visa for a photographer. It's just complicated. It's not like doing a project in Europe or Asia or the United States. That's all I can really say. It's I don't know that it's arduous. It takes a degree of patience that I don't always possess, and we've kind of touched on my lack of patience throughout this show. I'm not an inherently overwhelmingly impatient person, but I am also a New Yorker, so I expect people. And Carlito said that. He's like, I know you want this answer, but this isn't New York. You're gonna have to kind of meter your, we're a very, it's a fast-paced town. So when it comes to Habanos, it's a unique experience. I also needed a translator for that project because we had to sign a contract on behalf of Azaleen when we were down there. Conveniently, Mrs. Sigmond speaks fluent Spanish and reads and writes. So she was my translator, but she's also not an attorney. So like in any language, you and I can be fluent in a foreign language. Reading and reviewing a contract in Spanish is very, very, very different. Luckily, Martina Azaleen, the other co-founder, Prospero's wife, is also, she grew up in, I want to say Peru. I'm pretty sure that's right. So somewhere in South America. So she read the contract as well. Even though it had already been signed, and she said, you guys did good. But
lucky.
it was tough. I walked into a room, it's my wife and I. It's me and Miss Sigmond. We walk in, there's the head of marketing for Habanos and like 4 attorneys for Cuba Tobacco and Habanos, and we're in this conference room. Nobody's smoking, nobody's having a good time. Muy serioso. Anyone, Chiro, Carlito, Jose, my wife will tell you, my Spanish sucks. I mean, I can feed myself and I can buy a cigar. And that's about it. I mean, I can communicate on the most rudimentary level. So I'm there, and I was like, I was the wallflower. I was just the ornamental. They brought me. I will tell you something about that meeting, which was fucking awesome. They asked me what I want to smoke during the meeting, because you can smoke in the offices there, obviously. And I said I had never had a Montecristo B, as in Bravo, which is a very, 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 very rare cigar, and happens to be in the book. And I did in that meeting, smoked several of them, as a matter of fact. So that was cool. But it was complicated. There are a lot of rules and regulations, and you're dealing with a country that in many ways is just not evolved the way the rest of the world has. Right. I'm not saying they're immature. They just evolved in their own unique little bubble. And I've often said this many, many, many times. Communists and capitalists, when you when you're a communist nation, when you're a Lenin Marxist nation, and you're governed by that political system, and you make a luxury good, a world famous luxury good, and you're dealing with capitalists, essentially, even you guys, loose socialists. Yeah, but you know, it's a very different perspective, and they just don't see it the way we would in the States or in Europe, Western Europe specifically, or in Hong Kong or in Japan or in Dubai. They're just their references and their point of views and their approach and their managerial style is completely foreign to all of us. And again, it's not Sisyphean, but it definitely presents its set of challenges for sure.
Yeah. Wow. Get that.
So
Great answer.
Yeah.
Well,
I do this for a living.
Staying on the continuing on the Cuban topic. Last time out, we chatted a bit about Cuban cigars, but this was before the shock price hike was announced, and we haven't, I guess, spoken about that since then. But
no,
what
we
are
have
your
not.
thoughts? What are your thoughts on all this? And will your consumption of Cuban cigars continue like it was before, or do you only smoke Fuentes now?
No, I don't only smoke Fuentes. I think that's the general assumption, and I'm very fond of Fuentes. But even before, and I like making this clear, and I've answered this question publicly before, and I will make it very clear. Even before the Fuente books, I only smoked 3 cigars on a regular basis, on a regular kind of rotation, and that's Davidoff, that's Fuente, and a couple of very select brands of Cuban, Bolivar and Juan Lopez being 2 of them, but also Port Larrañaga, smoked a fair amount of those. I've never Hoyos. I've never been a Cohiba guy, never been a Trinidad guy. Every once in a while, not just because one of my best friends is the president of the company, but I love the La Polina Goldies, so I smoke those on a somewhat regular basis. But even for me, I mean, they only make 2,000 boxes a year, so and they make them twice a year. So I get 1 box from one run and I get 1 box from the other. And even that's all I get. So, or I got to pay retail, and that's not going to happen. So, so I'll throw that into the mix every once in a while. So I like making that clear. I don't know that I haven't smoked less Cubans because of the price hike. I've smoked less Cubans because almost every Cuban that I've smoked that's been produced after 2019, so the 20, 21, 22 releases have just been awful, quite honestly.
Yeah, the
production quality isn't there. The price hike is one problem, and it's the most impactful to a degree. Look, there is a reason, and I don't want to get too off topic here.
Yeah.
In the 80s, in the late 80s, famously, Zeno Davidoff built a bonfire out of Cuban Davidoffs. Very famous story. I'm sure you guys know it.
Yeah.
Quality control issues with Cuba, really since the 70s on, have been a consistent story. And when the cigars, it became more egregious for the singular reason that now they're more expensive. So if you bought a box of cigars, let's say it was 500 euros, and 2 or 3 of them were plugged, you would say that's the cost of doing business, per se, metaphorically speaking, with smoking Cubans. Now it's more like 5 or 6 cigars, maybe even a few more. Or they canoe, they're plugged, they canoe, they're too light, they're too heavy, the blend is off, which is also a problem. When you've been smoking cigars, you got to remember, I started smoking Cubans in 1985. So my institutional or encyclopedic knowledge of what a Monte Cristo or a Bolivar should taste like. Number one thing everyone said, everyone knows, who reads the Impossible Collection of Cigars or knows me personally, knows that the Bolivar Gold Medal is one of my all-time top 5 cigars, and the Corona Gigante. They re-released this year at the festival the Gold Medal. And everyone told me not to smoke it. They're like, it's light, you won't like it, tastes nothing like the old ones, doesn't even taste like the reissues and the re-releases that they did for the German market.
Right.
If you're new to cigars, that won't bother you because you don't know what that cigar tasted like in 1985 till they stopped production. And I could still get those cigars after that. And I could get Corona Gigantes with relatively great ease through 18, 19, I guess. Now they're near impossible and they're very expensive when you can't find them. So I think part of the problem is I know what they should taste like. So I'm not smoking more Cubans for a number of different reasons. One is quality and consistency. One is a blend continuity. And then there's the price. I mean, you know, I'm like anyone else. I'm a consumer, and price impacts my decisions. But I will tell you something, and I don't mean to keep on going back to Carlito, but he said something when we were in London, and I think you were there when this happened. He said, it is unconscionable that you guys are smoking a cigar that is 20, 30, 40, 100 euros, 120. And the worker who made it is getting 20 euros a month to live off, or the equivalent thereof in Cuban currency. And that and this is what I mean. Somebody asked him the right question, and he never said that to me. He said, I will grow leaf in Cuba, or I will buy leaf in Cuba once it opens up. But he's like, and ever since then, every time, like when I was in London, somebody gave me some of the, it's the Juan Lopez, their new regional edition, I think it is, Juan Lopez.
Oh, okay.
And it sold out, and it's now 225, I think, pounds a stick. And the minute I lit one up, I felt enormously guilty about it. Now, it doesn't take a lot, considering I'm part Catholic and part Jewish, to instill a fair amount of guilt in me. But the fact of the matter is, it's true. But I really, like, Carlito's words were really echoing.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that too.
Yeah, it's a bitter pill to swallow when you think of it in that context. Yeah. And so I look at cigars now with a different optic than I did before. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, and I'm not saying this isn't about flavor preference or your flavor profile or what you like in terroir and whatnot. But it really made me think that, you know, when people go to work at the Padron factory and the Fuente factory and the General Cigar factory and the Davidoff factory, they earn a living. And when you work at the Cohiba factory and you're rolling Trinidads and Cohibas, you're not. And that was heavy, man. That was a heavy thing. And he just laid it out there in perhaps one of the most famous Cuban cigar stores in the universe. So that was some deep shit. And so really epic. And so I think all those reasons, the last reason being the most contemplative, but I started getting angry. I mean, I refuse. I mean, I'll pick up a toothpick now and again, but I'm not going to buy a spear. I'm not going to core out the center. Either you roll it right or you don't. I don't believe in any of that. And when you pick up a Davidoff, when you pick up a Padron, when you pick up a Fuente, you simply do not have those problems. You pick up a My Father's cigar, you don't have that problem. And so you talk about, as we all know, I hate the term New World, but whether it's a non-Cuban or a New World cigar versus a Cuban, you just don't have those frustrations. You buy 25 cigars, you smoke 25 cigars. That's what you get. Yeah. And that's an ongoing problem. And that's been a problem for decades. It's now greatly exacerbated by the fact that with some of those cigars, you're paying 3-4 times for the amount. So we call that adding insult to injury, right? Yeah. And that's exactly what's going on. So there you go. So that's my takeaway on that.
2 cents. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That's a good I'm glad you came back to Carlito on that. I think that's a good way to wrap it up. We've taken so much of your time already. It's flown by much.
You have
over an hour.
It's a great inconvenience, I'll be honest.
For a busy man.
Not at all. No, this was great. It's always great chatting with you guys on the show, and really appreciate it. And thanks for your support. I appreciate that as well. I know I'm the old guy on Instagram and whatnot, and you guys have been very, very supportive, but it's been great. So there you go. What else can I say? I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Sorry, Ruben, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it was great to talk to you again. Like, you wanted to come back to see us, and I'm sorry once again that I didn't make it to London. But
I'll never forgive
I'm
you,
sure
Ruben.
That,
and that's really what it's coming down to. It's
that's what I was thinking.
Everybody's not at all. It's no, everybody's busy, man. Everybody's got a life, and trekking over to London isn't the easiest thing. But I was so glad you guys were represented there, and it was great fun, and it was a really special night. I don't know that we'd ever do another dual event in a single night. It was only because of the geography of London that we could accomplish that. So it was really special. Really special.
It was great. Nice. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Sig. I think we might have to complete the trilogy at some point and have you back sometime in the future.
Sure.
If you do.
Well, there's news coming.
Exactly.
So when news is released,
so that's a hint of that.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll talk then. We'll talk in another year or so. And
it was great.
By then, you still won't have graduated, but I will have moved
We'll see. We'll see. Maybe there's news coming on that front too.
Oh, hey now. Mom and I are so excited. I don't know.
Well, it was great to see you a few weeks back,
see you,
Sig, and great to have you back here as well. And thank you guys so much for watching. Check out that Fuente book. Even just look at the pictures. It's worth it online. And I'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Cheers.
Take care, guys. Ciao.